Welcome to the Short Stories Long Talks.
And today, we're plunging headfirst into a fascinating piece of short fiction, all thanks to a source shared by one of you. Philip K. Dick's incredibly thought-provoking story, We Can Remember It for You Wholesale. It first appeared back in 1966.
That's right. Now, the jumping off point of this story is Douglas Quayle. He's a regular guy with a specific yearning. He dreams of a vacation to Mars. But his bank account has other ideas,
Right. So he turns to Recall Inc., a company that specializes in implanting memories of experiences, a sort of mental tourism on a budget, basically.
And it's this seemingly simple premise, this desire for a fabricated experience, that really kicks off our podcast today.
Yeah, our mission, if you will, is to explore how Dick uses this setup to examine memory manipulation, the very slippery concept of self, and this growing trend of commodifying even our inner lives.
It might sound like a bit of light mental travel, but trust us, it opens up some pretty profound questions.
Definitely. Plus, it's worth mentioning, this short story has had a surprisingly long shadow, even inspiring a couple of, pretty well-known movies down the line.
Okay, so let's unpack this whole Philip K. Dick thing first. His name alone kind of conjures up stories that make you double-check what you think is real, right?
Absolutely.
And We Can Remember It for You Wholesale fits that bill perfectly. Almost immediately, Quayle's plan to buy a memory vacation hits a rather significant snag.
Yeah, he starts getting this nagging feeling, this suspicion that he might already have memories of a trip to Mars, not the implanted kind, but real ones.
What's fascinating here is the immediate disorientation this creates, and not just for Quayle, but for us following along. It throws the entire foundation of the story into question right away.
Totally. We're immediately faced with the central puzzle. What exactly constitutes a memory? Is it just like a set of neurological impulses that can be rewritten like computer code?
Or is it something much more deeply woven into our sense of who we are, tied inextricably to our actual lived moments?
Right. It's not just about misplacing your keys. It goes right to the core of your identity. And the title itself, We Can Remember It for You Wholesale. It's so loaded.
Yeah, that word wholesale. It suggests an industrial scale to something inherently personal, highlighting the dehumanizing potential of such technology, turning experience into something you can just purchase in bulk.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, it really resonates with a lot of anxieties we have today, doesn't it?
Oh, for sure. Think about the increasing role of technology in shaping how we experience the world, from the carefully curated feeds on social media
to these increasingly immersive virtual reality experiences. Dick was writing this in the 60s, yet he was already tapping into this underlying concern that these manufactured realities might eventually supplant genuine ones.
It really makes you think about the value we place on authenticity in a world that feels, increasingly simulated.
Exactly. It's a question that feels more relevant now than ever.
Okay, so here's where it gets really interesting. It's not just a fleeting feeling that Quayle has been to Mars. These suspected memories become more vivid, more insistent.
Yeah, he starts uncovering what seem to be suppressed recollections of actual and rather dangerous clandestine activities on the Red Planet, like secret agent stuff.
This is where the narrative really takes a sharp turn, and we encounter this crucial concept of the unreliable narrator. Quayle himself is deeply uncertain about his own past.
He can't definitively say whether these emerging memories are genuine or just some weird byproduct of the recall procedure going wrong.
And that uncertainty is so important because it mirrors the central question the story poses. If you can't even trust your own memories, the very foundation of your personal history,
then who can you trust? And what truly defines your sense of self, anyway?
It's a powerful metaphor, isn't it? These implanted memories act as a stand-in for how fragile our own sense of self can be.
Definitely. If the very building blocks of our personal history, our memories, can be altered or completely fabricated, then what truly anchors us as individuals, it really makes you consider just how much our past experiences shape who we are in the present.
Absolutely. And we see Quayle really wrestling with this internal conflict. He has this implanted desire, this longing for a Mars vacation that he paid for.
But then these potential suppressed truths start bubbling to the surface, suggesting a completely different and potentially dangerous past life. He's caught between the fabricated self he thought he was and this potentially more complex, threatening reality.
And the psychological toll on Quayle is immense. He spirals into this state of deep paranoia, constantly second-guessing the motivations of everyone around him.
Are they in on it? Are they trying to manipulate him? He completely loses the ability to trust his own perceptions, let alone the intentions of the people in his life. It's intense.
This raises a really important question about trust and authority, doesn't it?
It really does. Initially, Recall Inc. seems like this somewhat quirky, maybe slightly dodgy, but ultimately harmless provider of escapist fantasies.
Right, just selling dreams.
But as Quayle's situation unravels, they morph into figures of suspicion, potentially part of a much larger conspiracy to control or manipulate him.
That shift in how we perceive them really highlights Dick's recurring concern with these hidden agendas and the potential for seemingly benign institutions to harbor much darker undercurrents. You see that a lot in his work.
Definitely. He's always questioning the surface reality.
Now let's zoom out a bit and talk about Dick's actual writing style. What really struck me when I reread the story is just how direct and almost, well, plain his prose can be sometimes.
Yeah, it's not overly flowery.
No, but he can introduce these wildly bizarre, reality-bending concepts in this very matter-of-fact way, almost seamlessly blending the ordinary with the completely extraordinary.
That's a really key aspect of his genius, I think. He grounds the narrative in this very relatable, almost mundane starting point, Douglas Quayle and his desire for a vacation he can't quite afford.
Exactly, something we can all understand.
And then he gradually layers in these fantastical and deeply unsettling elements. Because Quayle's initial motivation is so ordinary, his subsequent disorientation, and by extension our own as readers, becomes all the more impactful. We can all, on some level, understand wanting an escape.
And the thematic threads that run through this story, they're quintessential Dick, aren't they? You've got that pervasive sense of paranoia, the deep dive into existential questioning, what is the nature of reality, what does it all mean, and that constant blurring of the lines between what's genuinely real and what's merely an illusion.
His characters so often find themselves wrestling with their own identities, deeply skeptical of any kind of established truth or authority.
We connect this to Dick's broader worldview. Based on his interviews and essays, you see this intense fascination with the nature of consciousness, with the power of the mind to shape our perceived reality.
Yeah, and his own personal anxieties and experiences, particularly his lifelong interest in the fallibility of memory, really seem to have fueled these recurring explorations in his fiction. It wasn't just some abstract philosophical exercise for him.
No, it felt deeply personal and urgent,
Absolutely.
It's also interesting to consider the kind of ripple effect this story has had. The fact that it's become such a significant touchstone in science fiction, influencing so many works that have come after it.
Right. The core ideas it introduced, implanted memories, questioning the very nature of reality, have really become foundational tropes within the genre. And We Can Remember It For You Wholesale was a really significant early exploration of these concepts.
It really underscores Dick's remarkable talent for taking a relatively simple starting point, a memory vacation gone awry, and building it into a narrative that is not only incredibly gripping, but also deeply thought-provoking.
That ability to extract profound questions from seemingly straightforward ideas is a real hallmark of truly great science fiction writing, I think.
Which nicely brings us to the screen adaptations. We've had not just one, but two major film adaptations inspired by We Can Remember It For You Wholesale, both going by the title Total Recall. The first one, released in 1990, directed by Paul Verhoeven and starring Arnold Schwarzenegger, is probably the version that comes to most people's minds first.
And that 1990 film, while certainly taking some creative liberties and, amplifying the action elements.
Oh yeah, definitely.
It does stick relatively closely to the fundamental setup of Dick's story. You have Douglas Quaid note the slight variation in spelling, Q-U-A-I-D,
Right.
who goes to recall seeking those Mars vacation memories and then experiences that unsettling revelation that he might already be a secret agent with suppressed experiences on Mars. The central conflict surrounding his true identity and the nature of his past reality is definitely present.
But the movie definitely amps up the action quotient significantly. It expands the plot considerably, introducing a full-blown Martian rebellion, a ruthless governor figure, and all sorts of advanced and often quite explosive technology.
Plus, you've got Verhoeven's very distinctive and often over-the-top directorial style, lots of intense action, a healthy dose of dark humor, and some memorable, shall we say, visual effects.
Yeah, unforgettable stuff, some of it.
Then we have the second adaptation, the 2012 film directed by Len Wiseman and starring Colin Farrell.
Right, the reboot.
This version also retains the core premise of implanted memories and the protagonist grappling with a potentially false identity, but it makes a significant change in setting. Instead of Mars, the action is primarily set on a dystopian Earth.
Yeah, divided into two dominant political entities, the United Federation of Britain and the colony, located in Australia. It's a very different feel.
This iteration feels more heavily invested in political intrigue and the idea of a resistance movement fighting against an oppressive regime.
While it does touch on those core themes of reality and identity that are so central to Dick's story, the overall emphasis often feels more geared towards the action sequences and the visual spectacle of this futuristic Earth. It's slicker, maybe.
Yeah, definitely more focus on visuals and action. And it's a really interesting point that both of these film adaptations, in their own ways, tend to resolve some of the ambiguity that is so central to Dick's original short story.
How so?
Well, in We Can Remember It For You Wholesale, the question of whether Quayle actually did go to Mars, whether those agent memories are real, remains somewhat open to interpretation right to the end.
Okay.
The films, perhaps needing a more definitive narrative arc for a cinematic experience, tend to provide more concrete answers about his past. They sort of have to pick a lane, you know?
Makes sense for a movie.
And they also lean into more conventional action movie tropes, which, while potentially making the story more broadly accessible to a large film audience, can sometimes dilute the philosophical depth and the unsettling uncertainty that makes the original story so compelling.
You lose some of that existential dread, maybe.
Possibly, but you really can't deny that the very fact that this short story has been adapted and successfully adapted in different ways speaks volumes about the power and the enduring relevance of Dick's initial vision.
Totally agree. These are clearly ideas that continue to resonate with a wide range of people decades later.
Absolutely. And when we consider We Can Remember It For You Wholesale in its entirety, its prescience is really quite remarkable. Dick penned this story back in the 1960s.
A long time ago now.
Yet his exploration of memory manipulation, the increasing ways in which experiences can be commodified and consumed, and the inherently fragile nature of identity feel incredibly pertinent in today's world, which is so increasingly shaped and mediated by technology.
In many ways, it serves as a fascinating and perhaps even cautionary tale for our times.
Definitely. And Dick's true genius, I think, lies in his ability to ground these incredibly fantastical and sometimes quite bizarre ideas in very relatable human anxieties.
Like we said, Quayle's fundamental desire for escape, for something more fulfilling than his seemingly ordinary life. That's a feeling that I think almost everyone can connect with on some level.
And it's through that very human and relatable desire that Dick manages to delve into these really profound and unsettling questions about what it truly means to be human when even our own memories can't necessarily be trusted. It's quite a trick.
Yeah. The film adaptations, despite their differences in approach and execution, have played a significant role in solidifying the story's lasting legacy and in sparking even wider conversations and debates about these complex themes.
Right. They've really helped to bring Dick's fundamental concerns about technology and the nature of identity to a much broader cultural consciousness, even if they simplify things a bit.
It's so much more than just a clever piece of science fiction. It's a really profound exploration of what makes us fundamentally real.
And what happens when the very bedrock of our identity, our memories, becomes potentially unreliable and open to manipulation.
Which leads us to a final thought for you, our listener. In a world that is becoming increasingly saturated with curated online experiences, where our digital selves can sometimes feel almost separate from our physical beings.
Yeah, think about social media profiles, avatars.
Exactly. How do we truly distinguish between a genuine experience and one that has been manufactured or carefully constructed?
And maybe more importantly, what are the long-term implications of that distinction, or the blurring of that distinction, for our own sense of self, for our understanding of what reality even means? Is there a truly real you that exists separate from your digital footprint? And perhaps more importantly, in this increasingly interconnected world, does that distinction even truly matter anymore?
Definitely something powerful to consider. Thanks for joining us, and a special thank you again to the listener who shared this truly fascinating source material with us.
Yeah, great pick. We definitely encourage you to continue exploring these ideas on your own.
Yeah, we're always up for a good conversation about storytelling.
Absolutely, always. Until next time, keep those imaginations going.
Catch you next time, folks.
Until next time.
See ya.